Today we're going to be doing 2.3. Okay, so here's the first one. First part is called, we're going to do derivatives using what's called the product rule. Okay, so it's a catchphrase here to help us out. The phrase is first d second plus second d first. So what that means is a product rule, we have two terms. So here's the first, here's the second. If you notice, for product rule to count or to be eligible to use the product rule, both terms have to have an x. So this term has an x, this term has an x. So now I can use the product rule. So what we would do before normally is you would FOIL this out and then take the derivative with the power rule. Well, now with product rule, we don't have to do that. We can go through and follow these steps here. So first means write down the first term. So this is the first term, that's the second term. So I'm going to write down the first term. Now I'm going to take d means take the derivative. So take the derivative of the second term. Well, the derivative of the second term, the 5 goes to 0, and the derivative of 4x is just 4. So this is first d second plus write down the second term and take the derivative of the first. Well, the derivative of the first term is just 3. So again, first derivative of the second plus second derivative of the first. After you've done that, that's kind of the difficult part. Now we just clean it up. So my derivative, if I distribute, I got 12x plus 8 plus 15 plus 12x. So my derivative is going to be 24x plus 23. And then that's your answer. So when you look at it, it's very important that you notice the difference. This is the first term. So that 2 and the x goes together because there's an x there. Cosine of x is my second term. The second part, 2 sine of x, we don't use product for it because there's no x here. There has to be an x in both parts to use product rule. Okay, so if I go through now and take the derivative, write down the first term, take the derivative of the second. So the derivative of cosine is negative sine. Plus, write down the second term and take the derivative of the first term. Well, the derivative of 2x is just 2. That's just, all of this is just the derivative of this part right here. First derivative of the second plus second derivative of the first. Now I have to take the derivative of this part, but it's not product rule again because there's no x here. So I just keep minus 2, and the derivative of sine is cosine of x. Okay, so now we just clean that up. Negative 2x sine x plus 2 cosine x minus 2 cosine x. So then that cancels. So my derivative is negative 2x. Negative 2x sine x is my derivative. All right, that's it for product rule. Stay tuned for part 2. So a second ago we did the product rule. Now we're going to do the quotient rule. So here's the fun phrase for that. Low d high, less high d low, square the bottom, and away we go. How could you not love that phrase? Okay, so this helps us take the derivative whenever we are dividing. But again, it's similar to product in that in order to do the product rule, both parts have to have an x. In quotient rule, the top has to be an x, the bottom has to have an x. Okay, so now for our fun phrase. If we said denominator and numerator, it wouldn't be such a fun phrase. So we use low and high. So low is really the denominator. High is really the numerator. Okay, so here we go. Here's our quotient. Here's our high part. Here's the low part. All right, derivative says, take the low part. So I'm going to just rewrite the low part. Take the derivative of the high. Well, 5x minus 2 is just a derivative of 5. Less, so I have minus. Write down the high part. So 5x minus 2. Take the derivative of the low. Well, the derivative of the low part is just 2x. And then the next phrase is square the bottom. So I'm going to put that all on the top. Whatever is the low part, I'm going to square it. So x squared plus 1 squared. All right, away we go. Now the fun part, we're just going to clean it on up and be done with it. So if I distribute that, I have 5x squared plus 5. Distribute here, I have a negative 10x squared plus 4x. And I never FOIL out the bottom. I'm just going to leave it x squared plus 1 squared. Cleaning that up for a final answer of a negative 5x squared from the 5x squared minus 10x squared. And it looks like the 5 and the 4x, we can't do anything with those anyway. So plus 4x plus 5 all over that bottom squared. Again, the square the bottom, I always just leave it like that. There's no reason to FOIL that out. We leave it alone and we're good to go. All right, so I have an x times x squared minus 1 over x plus 3. So I have an x on the top and I have an x on the bottom. The problem is this parentheses here would mean I'd have to do product rule. So you can't do a product rule and a quotient rule at the same time within the same problem. So we need to eliminate one of those. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to distribute this x. So I get x cubed minus x over x plus 3. Now I can do the quotient rule because I have an x on the top and I have an x on the bottom. So x cubed minus x, that's the high. X plus 3, that's the low. All right, here we go. Derivative. Write down the low part. Take the derivative of the high. So I get 3x squared minus 1 minus the high part times the derivative of the low. Well, x plus 1, the derivative of that is just 1. So we look out. And now I'm going to square the bottom. Okay, so now I just need to clean all of that up. So here I'm going to distribute the negative, but here I have to FOIL. So I'm going to put that over on the top here. So I'm going to erase my phrase. And we are going to FOIL that out. So if I FOIL that, I get 3x cubed minus x plus 9x squared minus 3. I'm going to distribute the negative there, so minus x cubed plus x, still all over x plus 3 squared. So my last step is just combining those like terms here. So that looks like a 3x cubed minus an x cubed. So 2x cubed plus 9x squared. Looks like the x's cancel and just minus 3 all over x plus 3 squared. All right, so that's it for quotient rule. We got one last part you're going to see in a second. Part 3 of 2.3. Everything is better with trig. So here are the rest of the derivatives. So we already did the derivative of sine is cosine, and the derivative of cosine is negative sine. All right, here are the other 4 that are left over. So remember this notation, d over dx is just a shorthand for take the derivative of. So the derivative of tangent is secant squared. Derivative of secant is secant tangent. And derivative of cotangent is negative cosecant squared. And derivative of cosecant is negative cosecant of x, cotangent of x. Notice any trig function that starts with the letter c, when you take the derivative of it, it's negative. That also holds true for cosine. Cosine starts with a c. The derivative of cosine is negative sine. So all derivatives of c trig functions are negative. So just something to pay attention to, something little to notice. All right, so here you go. 3 quick problems. This first one, derivative of x minus tangent of x. There's nothing special about a product rule or a quotient rule, so we're just going to take the derivative of each part. The derivative of x is 1. The derivative of tangent, well, if we go back up here, tangent is secant squared. And then that's it. That's all you have to worry about. So there's your answer to number 1. All right, number 2 is kind of a step up. It's a little bit more challenging because when I look at this, this is really x times secant of x. So 2 terms have an x in it. So that's my first term. That's my second term. Okay, so now I have to do product rule because my first term and my second term both have an x. So my product rule is write down your first term, take the derivative of the second. Well, the derivative of secant is secant tangent. And then product rule says plus, write down your second term, and take the derivative of the first. Well, the derivative of x is just 1, so then that's it, and there's nothing really you can combine. And that's your answer. Y equals 1 minus cosine x over sine of x. All right, so when I look at this, I have the quotient, I have the top, and I have the bottom, and both of them have an x in it. So x here and an x in bottom, so it means I'm eligible to do quotient rule. So from part 2, that's the high part. That's the low part. Okay, so quotient rule. Here we go. Write down the low term. Take the derivative of the high. So when I go up here, the derivative of 1 is just 0. Derivative of negative cosine would be a positive sine. Minus, write down the high term, and take the derivative of the low. Well, the derivative of sine is just cosine. All over the low term squared. On the bottom, notice that I didn't do this because that would mean the x is squared and we want the trig function squared. So just make sure you put the squared there. All right, I'm going to clean this up and I'm going to write it over here. Sine times sine, again, it's sine squared x, not sine x squared, so pay attention to that. Distribute here, I get a minus cosine of x. And then I'm going to get a plus, and again, it's cosine squared x, not cosine x squared. All over sine squared x. My derivative then, you have to pay attention that sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. So we can simplify that down to my final answer being 1 minus cosine x all over sine squared x. All right, that's it for 2.3. And actually, normally we would have a test 2.1 through 2.3. So we're done with kind of the first part of chapter 2. So we'll be looking for some reviews coming up. Okay, bye guys.